Welcome everyone to another video. Last time we were able to successfully integrate an emoji container in our application. And in this one, we'll move on to exchanging and displaying images onto our chat screen. This video can also be considered as a standalone video like the previous one. So if you're new, then you can follow along as well. And make sure to check out this full course. Also, since you are new, then please consider subscribing. Alright, so let's get started. The first thing you'll need to do is enable storage from Firebase console. So head over to the console and select storage. Then tap on the Get Started button. Then a pop-up tells you about your default storage rules and lets you set a cloud storage location. Just tap Done and you are done. It's time for us to get some necessary libraries. So I'll head over to PubSpec file and right below emoji picker I'll write image picker and get its latest version. Then we're gonna need path provider, and after that we'll also need Firebase storage. Great, it's time for us to start making and assigning functions to widgets which would carry out the main task. Now let me just lay out a roadmap to show you what all steps I'm going to follow. First, I'll assign a function called pickImage to the camera icon. Then pass an image source. Image source is an enum which comes from the image picker library, and it can take two values, namely camera and gallery, each depicting the source from which the image is supposed to be selected. So I'll start by searching for icons.camera, and there it is. And for the on tap of this gesture detector, I'll simply write pickImage and pass the source as imageSource.camera. Now if I press and hold Ctrl key and hover over image source, it tells you that image source is an enum that takes camera and gallery as value and comes from the image picker library. Let's define pickImage. So I'll come right over here and define pickImage function. Then image source will be a named parameter. So I'll make use of curly braces and write @required image source source. Then create a new variable called selectedImage of type file. Remember to import this file class from .io and nowhere else if it gives you the option. Now I'll assign it to utils.pickImage and pass the source. Of course, we now need to define pickImage function inside utils class. But we already know some things about the definition of this function, such as this pickImage function would have to be a feature of type file, since selecting an image or file or carrying out any IO operation, for instance, is an asynchronous operation. Therefore, I'll await for utils.pickImage to return those results. And since we are waiting for an asynchronous action to be executed, therefore we'll have to mark the entire function as asynchronous by using the async keyword right over here. Next, I'll head over to utils class or the utilities.dart file and create a new static method of type future file and name it pickImage. Then we'll expect a named parameter called image source source. We'll also have to mark this as async. Now here's where the main work begins. So in order to pick an image, I'll write imagePicker.pickImage and pass the source. Then I'll assign this to a variable of type file called selectedImage and wait for the results using the await keyword. Now we can simply return this selected image back, but it would be much better if we could compress this image before returning it. So before writing or returning anything, I'll create another static method of return type future of type file and name it compressImage. And then receive the image to compress. This will be an asynchronous function as well. Then at the top of the file, I'll import image.dart file from image package and give it an alias of IAM so that we can refer to its underlying functions using that alias. Now I'll return back to the compressImage function and start writing im.image image. Here we are creating an instance of class image which resides in image.dart, and we are accessing that using the alias im. Then I'll initialize it to im.decodeImage, image to compress .read as bytes sync. First, we simply read the entire image, and then in the next line, the actual compression will take place. And we compress the image simply by reducing its height and width, basically its dimensions and its quality. So first, I'll decrease its dimensions by writing im.copyResize, pass the image, set the width to 500 and height to 500 as well. So it's time for us to encode this decoded image and finally return that file. So I'll write return file. Basically, we are creating a completely new file object. Now we need to give some path to this file, but we'll handle that later. For now, I'll write ... write as bytes sync in order to write data into this file. Then I'll use im.encodeJPG and pass the image which is to be encoded with a quality of 85. Okay, so in order to give it a path, we'll need to access a temporary directory where files can be saved temporarily for future access. And we'll do so by writing final temp dir equals await get temporary directory. And we'll retrieve the path using final path equal temp dir dot path. Now, since all the images will be saved to the same directory, therefore we'll have to make sure that each image has a random name. Therefore, I'll create a variable of type int, name it random and set it to random.nextInt 10,000 by writing $path / image _ $random.jpg. After that, I'll go over to pickImage, return compressImage function, and just pass selected image as an argument. If we run the code, we'll be able to successfully retrieve the image file. Now it's time for us to upload the file to our server and display it back to the user once it's successfully uploaded. We can also show a little loader when the file is being uploaded or the file upload is in progress. First, I'll come inside of the pickImage function of chatScreen class. Then I'll write repository.uploadImage. Then for the image, I'll pass selected image. For receiver ID, I'll pass widget.receiver.uid. And for sender ID, I'll pass current user ID. Then we'll define the upload image function inside Firebase repository, and it will accept image, receiver ID, and sender ID, and return Firebase methods.uploadImage. But this time we'll pass all the arguments in a non-named manner. Then I'll come inside of Firebase methods and create a method definition for upload image with the same set of arguments and mark it as async. Alright, it's time for us to upload an image. So just over here, I'll create a function called uploadImage to storage and pass the image which is to be uploaded. Now it's time for us to actually define that function. So this function will return a future of type string, and we'll name it uploadImage to storage and receive the file argument. And of course, we're going to have to mark this as asynchronous. Now, in order to use Firebase storage, I'll scroll to the very top of this class and create a variable of type storage reference. After that, I'll come back to this function and write storage reference equals to Firebase storage dot instance to retrieve its instance, then call a function .ref to create a new storage reference at the root Firebase storage location, then child, and inside of the child, I'm simply going to pass datetime.now.milliseconds since epoch. After that, I'll create a storage upload task equal storage reference dot put file, and then pass the file which we need to upload. Then I'll create a variable URL. So once the storage upload task is completed, we want to be able to retrieve a URL so that we can access the image file from anywhere. Therefore, I'll write await storage upload task dot onComplete. So at first we wait for the storage task to get completed, and once it is completed, we'll write .ref.getDownloadURL. And all of this is also an asynchronous process. Therefore, we'll have to wait for it. So I'll write await at the very starting of the statement. So we first await for the storage upload task to get completed, which means that we first wait for the whole file to be uploaded to the server, and then we wait for its download URL to be formed and returned back to us. After that, I'll simply return the URL. Now, there are a lot of possibilities of something going wrong. So I'll just wrap everything inside of a try-catch block, catch an error, and print it. And if there's an error, we are simply going to return null. Now I'll go back to the upload image function, create a string URL, and await for the upload image to return back with a URL. Once we have the URL, I'm going to write set image message, pass the URL, receiver ID, and sender ID. Now it's time for us to create set image message. So I'll just create it over here, and it accepts a string URL, string receiver ID, and sender ID. And finally, I'll mark it as asynchronous. Then I'll create a message object, message, and I'll initialize that message object to message.imageMessage, since we are sending an image message. For the message, I'll simply write image, receiver ID, sender ID, photo URL. Now this is where we're finally going to make use of the photo URL property. So I'll write photo URL and set it to the URL that we retrieve after uploading the image to our server. And we are finally going to make use of this URL variable inside of our image.network widget so that we can display it. For the timestamp, I'll write timestamp.now, and for type property, which signifies message type, I'll write image. Okay, it's time for us to convert this message object into a map. So I'll create another variable named map and write message dot. Now so far we only have a method called toMap, which can convert a message object to a map. Now, in order to convert an image message into a map, we'll have to create a new method called toImageMap. So I'll come over to message.dart and create a map just below toMap, writing map toImageMap. And I'll basically copy and paste everything over here, but there will be one additional property, which is going to be map photo URL equals this.photo URL. Then I'll come back to Firebase methods and initialize the map variable to message.toImageMap. Now the only thing that is left is to set this to our database. And setImageMessage is basically going to be doing the same thing as that of addMessage2DB. So I'll just scroll to addMessage2DB and copy and paste the same thing over here. Alright, and this should work just fine. So let's test whatever we have at the moment. So I'm on the chat screen, and I'll tap on the camera icon, and it launches a camera. Then I'll click a picture and select save. Then we return back to the same screen, and the image is now being uploaded. Although we'd not be able to see its progress or a progress indicator at the moment. And once the image is uploaded, it's displayed as a simple message called image inside a chat bubble. This happens because the image message also has a message field which is set to image by default, if you remember. So we'll basically have to determine which kind of message are we encountering on every instance and display it accordingly. So if it's an image type message, then we would want it to be rendered inside an image.network widget, or else it would be rendered inside of these chat bubbles. But before doing any of that, let's first show a circular progress indicator while the image is being uploaded. And for that, we're going to be using the provider package. Now, if you don't know anything about provider package, I'll try to keep it as beginner friendly as possible. But since we are integrating it into a project which has already been in development for so long, and we already have a lot of code, so there is a possibility that you might get a little overwhelmed with multiple amount of changes. Anyway, I'll try my best. Let's start by importing the provider package to our project by mentioning it into the pubspec file. Now, let me just give you an overview. So we are going to be utilizing a provider from the provider package called change notifier provider, which notifies its listeners of any change in values from anywhere in the app. But the next thing you would want to ask is, what sort of values are we going to listen for? Or what sort of changes would they go through? And most importantly, who would be listening and reacting to the change of values? Let me answer the first question. what sort of values are we going to listen for? We'll listen for values of type viewState. ViewState is going to be a user-defined data type, and it takes two values, namely idle and loading. Now, what sort of changes would they go through? Well, we'll just create some methods. So the first one is going to be setToLoading, which would set the viewState to loading, and the second one would be setToIdle, which will basically set the viewState to idle state. Now, who would be listening for these values? Inside of a chat screen, we'll just create a widget which would be constantly listening for any changes to the viewState value provider. And if a viewState is set to loading, we'll display a circular progress indicator, or else we'll display a container. You'll get a much better understanding when we follow everything I just said. Let's start with the first step, which was to create a user-defined data type called viewState. Now this viewState will be nothing but an enum. So just come inside of the lib folder, and right over here I'll create another folder called enum and create a file inside of it called viewState.dart. This is nothing special really. You just need to write enum, then give the name to this enum, then open curly braces, and inside of those curly braces we'll write loading and idle, and then close the curly braces. Now we're going to define a provider. So again, I'll create a new folder called provider, then create a file called imageUploadProvider.dart. Then I'll create a class imageUploadProvider with changeNotifier. This changeNotifier gives us the ability to notify all the listeners about any change in a certain type of value by using the notify listeners function. We'll get to that later. For now, I'll just create a variable of type viewState, and set it to viewState.idle. So this is the default viewState. After that, I'll create a getter of type viewState and name it getViewState, which simply returns the viewState variable. Then, like I said, I'll create a method called void setToLoading, and I'll set viewState to viewState.loading. Then void setToIdle and set viewState to viewState.idle. Now, in order to leverage the power of changeNotifier and notify all the views or all the listeners of change in the value of viewState, it's absolutely necessary for us to call notify listeners. So I'll come inside of the setToLoading function and write notify listeners just over here. And I'll do the same thing inside setToIdle as well. Great, it's time for us to register a provider so that we can make use of its powers. Just come over to main.dart, and this is where we register a new provider. Now, there are several different types of providers. We are going to be making use of changeNotifier provider. So I'll wrap the material app with a new widget called changeNotifier provider of type imageUploadProvider. And then we need to pass the provider that we just created. So I'll make use of the create argument, which returns with the context, and we'll pass imageUploadProvider. That's it. ImageUploadProvider has been registered. If we had more than one provider classes, then we would have wrapped the material app widget with multi-provider widget. And we would have supplied it with a list of providers that we wish to register. Now we can make use of all the methods that we defined in our imageUploadProvider. Let's see this provider in action. So I'll come inside of chat screen and create a variable of type imageUploadProvider, and we'll have to initialize it inside of the build method. Why? Well, because it requires a context. For instance, I'll come inside of build method and initialize it by writing imageUploadProvider equals provider.of context, and we strictly need to specify the type of provider we are looking for, which is imageUploadProvider in this case. So you can see that we made use of the context parameter. Now if for some reason you want to initialize the provider outside of the build method, for example inside of the initState method, then you would have to use a post frame callback. We talked about that in the previous video. Anyway, so what we have done so far will work just fine. And just for a quick demo of how provider will work in real scenario, just below the message list, I'll start writing imageUploadProvider.getViewState. This returns the current value of viewState, and we'll check if it is equal to viewState.loading. If it is, then we want to show a circular progress indicator, or else we'll show a container. And in order to make this a bit more dynamic, just above the message list, I'll create a raised button with text change view state. And for the on pressed, I'll write image upload provider dot get view state equal view state dot loading question mark image upload provider dot set to idle else image upload provider dot set to loading. I think this is self-explanatory now that we have done the same thing over and over again. Basically, we want to set the view state to idle if it is loading, or else if it is already idle, then we would want to set it to loading. Notice that we haven't used a single set state, which means that we are not limited to using the values in the same class. Therefore, we can toggle the view state from practically any class and it would be reflected on this page. And that's the benefit of carrying out state management in Flutter using provider, block, and other such packages. Alright, so it's time for us to get rid of the provider change button and call set to idle and set to loading methods at the right place and on the right time. So first I'll get rid of this button just like that, and then we also need to wait, let me just bring this back and let me just run it to show you that if I tap on provider change, you can see a circular progress indicator. We want this circular progress indicator to be only visible when a user is uploading an image and that image is in progress or that image is being uploaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the circular progress indicator with a container, and we should give this container, we should give this container a margin from the right, agentsets dot only right, and give it a margin of about 15. Then we would also need to set an alignment. So I'll write alignment dot bottom, or maybe just center right, because one way or the other we just want it to be on the right side of the screen. So if I reload that, there we go. So you can see that circular progress indicator looks perfect over there. Okay, and we don't need this button, so I'm just going to get rid of that. So once we have initialized image upload provider, I'm just going to find our camera icon. There we go. Then I'll go to pick image. So we have file, selected image. I don't think we need to do anything over here, but we'll need to provide our provider to upload image function. So we'll basically have to add another named argument. So I'll write image provider and pass the image upload provider. There we go. Then I'll control click on upload image to go to its definition and add required image upload provider, image upload provider. And then I'm finally going to pass this over here. Then I'll control click on upload image. Wait, there's a problem in chat screen. Okay, so the name was supposed to be image provider. Let's just change it to image upload provider. That would work fine. Then on Firebase repository, I'm going to control click on upload image and add an image upload provider over here. Just like that. Okay, that's great. I'm also going to get rid of these comments that I added. So yeah, there we go. Now I'm just going to access the image upload provider and then call set to loading. So what's happening here? Well, when you click on the icons.camera and select an image, then upload image is called. As soon as the upload image is called, we'll call image upload provider.set to loading, which in turn will set the view state to loading, and that will display circular progress indicator. And then finally we'll have to just write hide loading. So over here I'm going to write image upload provider dot set to idle. Okay, let's test this. There you go. So I'm going to tap on camera. This launches the camera, and I'm going to take a pic of my UPS and tap the tick. Okay, nothing happened. I wonder why. So there was a sort of delay. I don't think that should be there. I think the delay was during the compression of the image. So the image was first compressed and then it was returned back to us. There you go. So as soon as the image is uploaded, the circular progress indicator goes away and we get to see the image chat bubble. Now we'll deal with that delay after a while, but for now let's just deal with all these images. So I'm gonna go over to chat screen. Okay, so we'll have to detect what type of messages are we receiving. So I'm going to control click on the get message function right over here. And I'm going to detect that if message dot type equal image. So if message type was image, actually let's just get rid of this string from here and I'll go over to strings. And just over here, I'll write const string message type image. And there we go. Then I'll come back to chat screen and write message.type equal message type image. There we go. So if message type was an image, or maybe if message type is not an image, then we would like to show a text, or else we would like to show an image.network. And over here I'll write image, I'm sorry, not image, message.url. But there's an issue there, and that issue is oh, okay, so it's actually photo URL, not URL, photo URL. Alright, let's see how does that looks. There's an error and it says URL is not supposed to be null. So there's something is going wrong over there. I'm also going to add another check so that our app does not crashes like this. I'll write if photo URL is not equal null, then I can display image.network, or else I'll simply display image, no image, I'll just say text URL was null. There you go. So URL was indeed null for all of those. That's weird. That was not supposed to happen. So let's see where the problem really is. I'm going to say print URL in order to detect whether we are even getting some kind of URL or not. I'm actually going to hot restart. Okay, so I'm waiting for a URL. Let's see if we get one. It's being uploaded, and yeah, we do get an URL right over there. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, so we do get an URL. You can see that in the console. This is what the URL that we are returned with looks like. So if I control click on that URL, you can see that it should take me to the necessary image file. The problem is right over here. See, this message object which we are receiving, or which was made, is for message.fromMap, and we are only mapping these values. So I think we would have to update this from map. So I think we would have to write something like this dot photo URL equal map photo URL. Make sure that this key and this key are same. Now I'm gonna hot reload once again. Now we are able to see the image. So the only problem was that in the message.fromMap, we should have used this key as well. It was basically not able to map the photo URL, and therefore the value of photo URL was always null. Now if you wish, you can control these images as well. I mean the size of the images. Since we are using a list view, all of the other children are destroyed as soon as we scroll away from them. So it would be best for us to use cached network image. Go to pubspec.yaml and just import that and click Ctrl S. It gets the package, and after it is finally synced, I'm gonna come over here wherever I wrote image.network. Inside the chat screen, I'm going to create a new folder called widgets, and in here I'll create cached image dot dart. Then I'll import the material library, create a stateless widget called cached image, and it will take a string URL, and then cached image at required, I'll write this dot URL. Actually, you can see that our chat bubbles have a little border radius, but the image which is inside of the chat bubble do not have a border radius. So in order to make it look a bit better, I'll write clip or rect and give it a border radius dot circular, maybe 5 would be good enough. Then for the child I'll write cached network image. Now this comes from the library that we just imported, and for the image URL we're simply going to pass URL. But what's so great about this? Well, first it caches the image. Second we can also show a placeholder. There we go. You can see that in front of placeholder the documentation says that placeholder is the widget that is displayed while the target image URL is loading. And here we can simply write context comma URL. This is what it returns with, and we are going to return circular center child circular progress indicator. Okay, and then for chat screen I'm going to replace image.network with cached image. Okay, and there's something that we need to pass, which was URL. Great, and now everything should work fine. But I suppose everything should work fine, but there are errors. Okay, so the error says that there's a missing plugin exception. You can see that it says no implementation found for get database path for this package, which is SQFlight. Cached network image actually makes use of SQFlight or SQLite in Flutter to save or to cache images, and that's why we would have to rerun the application so that it can make that connection. Alright, so I have relaunched the application and now there are no errors whatsoever. So I think the images are being loaded, and there we go. First one's loaded, second, third, fourth, and hopefully the fifth. To be honest, it still feels a little inefficient to me, so it would be better. First, it looks very bad, so it would be better if we could decrease the size of this. But since the video is already very long, I think I'm going to address some other feature or some other anomalies later on in the future videos. But it would be much better if we could reduce the height of these to somewhere about 150, or maybe we can decrease their aspect ratio. Okay, this looks bad. The images are not being loaded every time because those images are actually cached. So even though the widgets are getting destroyed when they are out of view in the list view, still they are able to sustain their previous state quite easily since they are cached. So that's great, and I think we were successful in exchanging images. So we learned about a lot of things. First, image picker library, then cached network library, then provider. Okay, so currently we are able to send an image from here by launching the camera. Now, what if you wanted to, oh come on, I lost the connection to device once again. There's some issue with my device. Anyways, I don't think we'll require that anymore. Also, you can see that how quickly all those images were loaded, right? If I go back, tab again, see how quickly all of those are loaded now. So this seems very seamless. Currently, we are only able to select from the camera. Now, what if we wanted the user to be able to select the images from their gallery? Well, that's simple as well. I'll just go to chat screen, then search for content and tools. There you go. And just over here, okay, there's an issue with this. Currently, we will not be able to add an on-pressed callback. So I'll just go over to model tile, wherever that is, and I'll write final on. Actually, I'll simply write final function on tap. Then I'll write at. Actually, this will not be required, so I'll just write this dot on tap. Then I'll replace the custom tile. Does custom tile has an on tap method? Yes, it does. Right, on tap, on tap. Great. Now I'll scroll back to where we are supposed to be. Then for media, I'll simply write on tap and right, utils.pickImage. Yeah, there we go. So we can simply call the pickImage function using this source. So I'll go back to, so I'll simply call pickImage, simply write pickImage. There we go. PickImage, and PickImage requires a source, so that source is going to be image source dot gallery, and this should work exactly as you would expect it to. So when you will click on the media, it will launch a gallery. You can select your image and that image will be uploaded. Okay, so that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you liked this one and learned a lot of new things. If you did, then let me know in the comments down below. If you're new, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And in the next video, let me see what we're going to do in the next video. That's right, video call between users. A lot of you have been requesting that when are we going to start with video calling between users. So the next video is just going to be about that. I hope you'd be excited for that one. Okay, so thank you for watching and I'll see you next time.